All right, we are live. We are here. We are alive. I mean, I would imagine that we have to be alive at some point, whether you're live with me today or you're watching this back. But I'm just thankful that we're here together just to be alive, and not only to be alive, but to live life to the full. And there's an opportunity that we have in this journey of empowering children and helping them to overcome ADHD that has to do with a life that can be beyond what you're experiencing or what you're seeing. That true understandings can bring a revolutionary and transformative experience to your life, your child, their identity, their legacy. And that's why we're here together. Thank you for being here today. I'm AJ McMahon, and we're on this journey together. I've had the opportunity to be able to share accurate info about ADHD from the DSM, that the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and by the American Psychiatric Association, DSM for short. I hope that was helpful. And there are links to the three-part series that I was able to share in the description. So please check those out if you haven't already. We continue our journey because this is about empowering you, and then you being able to empower your child, a child, that child, any child that you get the opportunity in your life, in your corner of the world, to impact for the betterment of themselves and others. And the opportunity that we have is tremendous. That's why today we're going to be looking at empowering your child from the perspective of, we're going to talk about a worldview and a universe view from geocentrism and heliocentrism. We're going to talk about divergence, and then we're going to look at disorder versus development. These are important concepts because in this journey, we're looking at accurate info, because when you get accurate info, it revolutionizes the opportunity you have for growth. Because how can we base true growth on info that's inaccurate? Think in your life about any time that you've been given info that had the appearance of wisdom but wasn't accurate, and imagine what happened when you found the accurate info. How did that impact your life? How did it change your life? How did it change your view? Because when we can take off the lens of what is popular and replace it with a lens of what is powerful, we get an opportunity to be able to put together with that accurate info a plan. And with that plan, then we can empower true transformation. So it's about accurate info, a plan, and true transformation. I wish that we could just talk about tips and tricks that would empower your child, a child, that child, to overcome ADHD. But that's why we are so stuck, because tips and tricks aren't effective. They might be effective for a few days, maybe a few minutes, maybe a few hours, maybe even a few weeks, but usually not even that long. But what is powerful is for us to have an accurate view of children, to be able to put together a plan based on our own knowledge and wisdom that's often just suffocated by the popularity of views that we are inundated with on the internet, through media, and even through sometimes what we see and experience every day. But when we can be able to take our own natural wisdom, maybe even God-given wisdom, if that's your view. But if it's not, we don't want to get distracted by anything except for the fact that you have your own knowledge and wisdom. And we want to combine accurate info so that you can develop a plan. And with this plan, that is where the power of consistency and conviction comes from. We often hear that as we're working with children, you want to be consistent. Well, so many people that are working with children aren't consistent because they're confused by many different streams of information. And over here, you've got somebody saying this, or this video presenting that, or this professional saying this or this. parent or grandparent or friend saying that, and we're so confused because we care. We want to do the right things. We want to do the most effective things to empower our children or those children to succeed. And we're trying our best and we're putting together all these things, but oftentimes we've got to drown out the noise because most of it is noise. Most of it, even the most popular stuff we're going to get into, comes from a what I would call, in this analogy or metaphor or whatever the right, maybe there's no right or wrong there, but let's just say metaphor. And this is a metaphor today. We're going to look at this metaphor of the geocentric view. The geocentric view that we're going to get into in a minute has to do with the theory, the belief for a long time until about the 16th century that the sun and the universe basically, I may not be saying this right, so please forgive me if you science buffs out there are like, don't be too critical, but okay, the basics of it, the geocentric view, is that the sun and the the universe revolved around the earth. Okay. And until about the 16th century, that was the prevailing view. And everything at that time, I would imagine, I wasn't alive at that time. I'm not Methuselah, but my guess is that at the time, when you are in the world and you wake up every day and you see the sun, we say it rises in the east and it sets in the west, where according to our geocentric view, that is what's occurring. And we see the sun every day and you have these experiences and you look in the sky, and everything that we can see and experience can reinforce this concept that the sun revolves around the earth, because that's what it looks like. Well, when we're talking about your wisdom and this opportunity, we have to go beyond what we see every day, what we experience every day, what we hear every day, and all the things that seem to make sense on that visual and experiential level, because that is what, I guess, Copernicus and Galileo or any of those who brought the heliocentric view, that actually the earth revolves or orbits, or whatever the technical term is, but goes around the sun. And with this broader view, we can understand the planetary alignments and gravity and all these different, orbits and all these different wonderful things. And when we can go beyond the popular belief of ADHD, that ADHD has to do with the brain, has to do with divergence, has to do with anything like that, that we can actually be able to get to in this metaphor, the heliocentric view. And in this metaphor, the geocentric view is that we are programmed. When I say programmed, I'm not trying to talk about some matrix, people, things taking over our brains. It's not what I'm talking about exactly, but more so that the popular geocentric view of kids really revolves around, is focused on a view of them when they have struggles that are beyond our comprehension, or beyond our expectation, or beyond our view of what is normal, that those are a result of something that is divergent or challenged or disordered in or with their brain. And though that is the popular view, that view, when we are able to zoom out, when we're able to go beyond all the things that we see and experience on a daily basis and look into the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and understand that in the introduction, the leaders in the World Health Organization and the American Psychiatric Association found it important to indicate that they placed ADHD in the neurodevelopmental section of the DSM, which connects it with the brain because they had to make a judgment about where to put it based on incomplete or more often conflicting data, not neuroscience. That when we look into the actual historical accounts of how things occurred, and we read what was written and what was talked about and how things came to be in context, we can see a totally different picture that indicates that the idea of ADHD being a brain phenomenon has been and only been a popular theory. Now, this is probably the point where I'm talking to just a few people, because maybe this is the point where a lot of people have already cut this video off. You've already stopped. You already said, okay, I'm going on. I'm not going to hear any more of this nonsense. But think about it. There was a time when it was, if anyone talked about the universe differently, that if anyone talked about the universe beyond the geocentric view, beyond the view of what people could see and experience and witness every day, there was a time that those people were likely dismissed. I'm not here to say that I'm Galileo and Copernicus. I'm here to say that you are. I'm here to say that when you can get beyond what is popular and just take a look into the science, into the understanding of your child, into the developmental understanding and experiences and wisdom, you can see for yourself the view of the universe, your world and your universe, that is transformative, that can be based on an accurate understanding of how things are working and evolving and what they mean, and be able to apply wisdom with that understanding that can help you to actually help your child, not just live with or think that it's just a part of them, but to overcome ADHD. The divergence that we're going to talk about is not in the brain. It's the fact that the world diverges from a true understanding of children. The world focuses and pours energy and inundates us with this geocentric, this world view of children that has to do with looking at children through the lens of disorder. Think about it. Think back to the latest podcasts you listen to. Think back to your internet search. Think back to your visit with a doctor or a professional. Think back to how it was shared, what connected with you. Where was it connected with you, an understanding of your child from the perspective of understanding children 12 and under? Was it really something that was able to help bring about a view of your child from a developmental perspective? Or was the perspective really focused on identifying the struggles, being able to categorize or explain the struggles, maybe why the struggles were occurring, and then however you guys were going to move forward was to address the struggle? Was it struggle centric? Was it struggle focused? Or was it developmental or child focused? Really think about and discern, because you have wisdom, you have discernment, and don't allow what's so popular and in our face every day to just lull you to sleep. Wake up your senses, wake up your discernment, wake up your intelligence, wake up your wisdom, and be able to just challenge even the things that we're talking about. Use your own discretion, use your own wisdom. Look beyond the surface of what's being shared and say, hey, okay, well, can I see a source of that information that can actually be substantiated? When we look into this source, what is it really saying? What are we really talking about? What view is it coming from? Is it coming from a view of understanding my child, or is it coming from a view of looking at my child through the lens of this disorder, or kind of categorizing or sometimes I get a little choked up. I am passionate, but sometimes I'm human and blah, 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 stuff's going on. But anyway, what we're really talking about, what we're passionate about is accurate info. And the divergence often comes from being able to look at children and understand them instead of being able to really uh, be inundated with a view from a disorder lens. The divergence comes from our own ingenuity to what is so popular. The divergence comes from the understanding that your child is able, and this is not just something that we're saying that's a feel good, rah rah type of thing, but that your child is able to that your child is able beyond what you may see and experience. I had an experience with a family. I've been privileged to be a licensed professional counselor in Arkansas for over 25 years, to meet with thousands of families. I don't really come to you as a counselor today. I come to you as a fellow parent of a daughter who's 20 and a son who's 6. Yes, there can be quite a divergence in age there. But the beauty of it is that we have this chance as parents to unite, to come together. And when I was working with one family, I was able to help them to see their child from the perspective of understanding their child, because they had, in this metaphor, the geocentric view. Everything they had saw on the internet, everything they were seeing and experiencing with their child, the struggles that they didn't understand, pointed to, had them leaning towards seeing or believing that their child likely had a disorder beyond their control. They had never seen their child be able to demonstrate a level of ability or control in certain ways. They'd never seen it. But when we started working together and I helped them to understand their child, and I demonstrated some basically when basically not demonstrated because it's not about me. I was able to use the understanding of children from, I would say, in this metaphor, the heliocentric, the center of the universe being them, and understanding them and them from a developmental perspective. I was able to use that to be able to help them to see that their child was actually able to do things, to demonstrate levels of self-control they had never seen before. And this was just not an in office phenomenon. This was an in life phenomenon. And they were able to see for the first time that their child was able, but they just didn't know how to unlock it. That when we can look at and go beyond the the geocentric, and if I've said egocentric view, I apologize for that, because in my mind, I think of egocentrism, which is actually something that has to do with kids and kind of how they operate. But geocentrism, I can't talk. Geocentrism in this metaphor. But when I help them to get beyond, in this metaphor, the geocentric view, basically the popular view of looking at their child, or suspecting that their child wasn't able to do things or carry out things that they were hoping because of a disorder, when I was able to help them to look at it from the perspective of development, and they were able to unlock their child's ability because it's there, but they just didn't know how, then their whole opportunity became transformative. And this is the thing that is available for us. And some of you may feel like, well, it's available for some, but AJ, you don't know the struggles that my child has. You don't know the difficulties that we go through. You don't know what we're seeing. But at the same time, I don't. I don't know the specific struggles that your child has, but I know children, and I can understand children from their perspective. And when we can do that, it's transformative. When we can look at and understand that although we see the sun rise in the east and set in the west, And although we can experience this from earth, we can understand that there's more. We can understand that from a scientific perspective, from an accurate info perspective, that the universe is larger, and the universe of your child is larger as far as it relates to the developmental understanding of them. So we've got to stop diverging. The divergence is not in the child's brain. The divergence is in the popular to the profound. That's where the divergence really is. The popular geocentric view or the disorder focused view to the profound. The excuse me, sorry to do that right in your ear. But to the profound, that we don't want anything. We don't want a throat. We don't want a view. We don't want popularity. We don't want scratchy, expressions through this video. We don't want even our own biases. And I'm not trying to offend, but anytime that we kind of come to believe things, we've got our own biases there. We've got to be able to check a bit and wade through to get to a view, a broader view. And in this opportunity that we have, I ask you to journey with me to a broader view of seeing your child through a heliocentric, through a child centric, through understanding your child from their perspective, from the perspective that your child is in a developmental state. And we say, wow, AJ, I've tuned in for what now, 20 minutes, 25 minutes just to hear that my child is developing? Well, duh. Okay. Well, how come we're not talking about that more? How come the podcast or the video or the doctor, where's the developmental information? Where's the developmental information, and understand that that's the foundation, that the struggles don't mean that the child is diverging from development, that the developmental stuff is the reason oftentimes why your child is having the struggles, that the developmental stuff is the reason why your child is having the struggles. So let's look at this in this metaphor from the heliocentric view. We expand the universe, look at your child from a developmental perspective. Okay. We have talked about, well, we haven't talked about on this video, but most of the time when I encounter parents and I mention something about brain development, it could be the words or anything. Most of the time I get a reaction from parents like, oh yeah, I've heard of brain development, or I know about it at some level, or there's some connection almost immediately where they indicate to me through body language or verbally that, yeah, brain development, we get that. We know that's a thing, right? Okay. So we here I go again. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me. We know brain development is a thing, but what is the thing? What does it mean? How does it play into with our child? And how does it relate to the struggles that your child, a child, those children might be having? Well, here we go. Let me take a drink real quick. And in this pause, let's think about this brain development. What do you know about? What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you studied? What are your experiences with the lens of development, especially brain development? Let's come back to that after this sip, and get a sip of your own, hopefully something refreshing, hopefully something helpful, beneficial. I'm going to take a sip of my water here. Refreshing. And these views that we're talking about, these developmental views, can be so refreshing and exciting to be able to zoom out and look at your child from this perspective. So we heard about brain development. From what I understand and researching and the things that I present, I have done significant and substantial looking into. I have poured myself because I've wanted to understand. And in my wanting to understand, I was able to shift from the view that I was inundated with as a mental health professional of the disordered view to be able to get to the developmental view. Now, how did I get to the developmental view? Well, that was because when I wanted to understand the science and the backing and the foundations and the history and just the tangible information behind the disordered view, such as ADHD, it didn't substantiate all the things that I was being inundated with in the medical community, in the society, in my own perspectives and beliefs. And when I was able to look into the accurate information, which pointed more to develop understanding kids from a developmental perspective, everything changed. So back to the brain. So what I have experienced or seen or has been shared with me that I understand about brain development is that basically the brain develops from the back to the front. Okay, that from the time that we're born till about mid 20s, our brain is in this developmental process overall. Okay. So the brain can be about 90% of its size by the time a child or we are age 5, but it's just developing. And in this development, from the back to the front, the part of the brain that's most dominant for kids that are 12 and under have to do with the more like the back part of the brain. Okay. I won't get into the technical terms of those because I don't want to file those up just by memory, but you can look up this information. And this is what I encourage you to do with anything I present or that's presented to you, that you look up the information for yourself, that you vet it, that you look beyond what's on the surface of what's presented to what it's really saying and what it's not saying. But as you look up this information on the brain, that my understanding is that it develops from back to front. The part of the brain that's most dominant in children 12 and under is responsible for basically emotions and impulses. The last part of the brain to fully develop when we're about in our mid 20s is the prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is responsible for impulse control, mood regulation, and judgment. Three things: impulse control, mood regulation, judgment. Why is that important? How many times do you see a child struggling with impulse control? What about mood regulation? What about judgment? And we can put all these fancy titles on it, like they have trouble with transitioning, or this is a part of that divergence, or they're having all these other hyper focusing, or whatever the terms are. But when we can get past all the jargon and just understand that the most dominant part of a brain for children 12 and under has to do with emotions and impulses. That when we talk about executive functioning, which I hear a lot, these children are struggling with their executive functioning skills. And when we're taught that or told that, sorry, we're not actually taught. We're just told over and over and over again that the children 12 and under are struggling with their executive functioning skills and that we've got to help them with executive functioning skills. And when they have challenges with their executive functioning skills, that this may mean that they have a disorder. But when we look at it from the heliocentric, child development centric view, we can understand children. We understand that by brain development, the last part of their brain to fully develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control, mood regulation, and judgment, the executive functioning stuff. That's the last part of the brain to fully develop when they're in their mid 20s. So, children under the age of 12 and even teenagers, but we're focusing on children 12 and under, they're struggling with executive functioning because that's not the most dominant part of the brain. That when they have the impulses and the emotions and the big feelings, as we call them, and all that stuff, that's developmentally on par. It's to be able to apply this understanding to go further to say, hey, when they're struggling with impulse control, when they're struggling with these big feelings, when they're struggling with attention, these are not things that are disordered. These are developmental things. Part of their development that we can understand is in the development of character. And this is something I never hear us talk about in our mental psychiatric medical field. That geocentric view of children does not allow for the understanding of the broader world and universe of character development. And in character development, children don't really have this naturally. Although there are natural reasons, such as their own internal motivation, some kids are just internally motivated to please and achieve the adults. Some kids are internally motivated to be more responsible. It can be something that has to do with birth order or temperament that we will hopefully get into in future videos, or other naturally occurring things that are happening with your child from the developmental perspective. Some kids may lean towards more of a semblance of self control or ability to apply themselves or attend because they've got other internal motivations going on. But a lot of children, as they're operating, now we're going to look at that word I brought up before, egocentric. A lot of children, from their perspective, do see the world kind of revolving around them. And that's not a disordered thing. That's just a kid thing. And they see the universe and the world and the parents and kind of revolving around them from an egocentric point of view. And they're bright, just like the sun is bright. Your child is bright in the sense of smart. How many of children or your child or those children do you know that are struggling with some kind of challenge, whatever it might be, whether it's attending or listening or following through a task or transitioning, whatever the challenge might be with emotions or behavior, or maybe you think the brain, how many of them are really, really smart? How many of them like 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 you're not just trying to be that, that egotistical parent where you're like, hey, my child is the brightest in the universe. But really they are bright. They're super bright, they're super smart. And in their own intelligence, combined with their egocentrism, combined with the fact that in the most dominant parts of their brain are responsible for impulses and emotions, you've got a concoction where a lot of times children figure out pretty quick and are motivated to have their universe, their parents, their interactions, their activities revolve around the way that they want things to be. And in their own ways, they are trying to navigate things in these ways. They're not bad kids. This is just a part of development. But when it comes out in ways that we don't understand, we can't wrap our minds around, that the geocentric view doesn't apply to, when they are struggling to a degree that doesn't make sense. And when we apply, here's another part of that geocentric wisdom, the appearance of wisdom, actually. When we apply the geocentric views of parenting to children that don't meet them where they are, that don't effectively be able to encounter them from a universal perspective of their development, their needs, but it's all a part of this adult wisdom. And that's a big part of this whole, in this metaphor, geocentric view. In the geocentric view, we take all this stuff that sounds good to us adults, that applies to us adults, and we apply it to them. We think we know. We think we understand. Even in the medical and psychiatric community, kids, because we're taking this adult stuff that sounds good to us and we're applying it to them. Okay. One of the big things, and I'm not trying to knock anything as much as I'm trying to help open up our view and look at it to shift for us to diverge from the geocentric view to the heliocentric view, to the child-centered view, to the development-centered view. That's not for some kids that don't have disorders, but for all kids. And when I say all kids, I mean, listen, the vast majority of the kids out there don't have something going on with their brain. Just don't, regardless of what we're seeing or experiencing. That's not what's happening as far as disorder is concerned. What's going on with their brain is development, is the fact that they don't have the strength. This is where character comes in. They don't have the strength to overcome their feelings and impulses. When they cry out to you and say, I can't do this. I want to be good, but I can't. When they break your heart with these expressions, the geocentric view indicates that they are explaining that there's a disorder, there's a divergence, there's a difference there that keeps them from being able to attend, to follow through with tasks, to control themselves, their emotions, to be able to go to bed, to eat the food, whatever it is that we would hope that they would do. The geocentric view says that there's a divergence. There's something going on that explains why this is happening. But the accurate information from a developmental perspective says that what your child is saying when they are indicating and even crying out that they can't do it, they're not indicating a matter of ability. They're they're indicating a matter of strength, that they need us to understand them from a developmental perspective. And when we do that, to be able to apply what they need, not what the world continues to say they need, such as this gentle parenting movement, but when we can understand what they need, what children actually ask for in safe environments that are not their parents, right? Because part of this brightness and the smartness, they're smart enough not to say this stuff really in front of their parents. But when you can understand children and talk to them and listen to them from their perspective, they will tell you, as countless children, almost every child I've been able to really talk to and understand from their point of view has told me that they want and need us to be able to empower them according to their development, according to what they need, to be able to understand that they don't have the strength to carry through with the the expectations that we have. It's not a lack of ability, it's a lack of strength. It's a lack of that. And how do we develop that strength? We can't develop that strength through talking to them. We've got to develop the strength, to help them develop the strength by meeting them where they are as developmentally choice and consequence learners, to be able to help and shape their experiences they have so that they make a choice and then they have the appropriate consequences. And consequences just means the results of their actions, that the results of their actions meet them where they are developmentally and empower them to grow in the ways that actually make sense for them. I think about pineapples. I had a chance to go to Hawaii, and this was a great experience. I've had a chance to actually go a couple times. And one time that I went to Hawaii, I went to and I don't know if they still have it, but at this time they had a Dole plantation that you could tour. And then there's Dole, the company that, they grow pineapples. It's not the only thing they do, but that's one of the things. Anyway, bottom line, I was fascinated because we went out to this area and there was this like red soil and the pineapples were in it. And it was explained to us that pineapples, that their natural way of growing is in certain environments, that Hawaii or maybe like drier climates or other areas, this is where pineapples are often grown naturally because their environment, that's the environment that they really grow in. They're really thriving. That's very different. I would just think that, man, just, you just grow stuff in like typical environments, but the environments that work for pineapples are not the environments that work for tomatoes or other things. So when we look at tomatoes or this adult wisdom, it's not pineapples. It's not our children. We get to understand, and in this journey, the reason why we're talking about these things is because we get the opportunity to understand your child from their perspective, from the universal view. And when we can open our eyes, you can see the stars and the sun and your daughter and all these different things from a perspective that is truly transformative, that you can break away from all the geocentric views that are not empowering, that lead to methods of identity and treatment that are not based in accuracy, that you can be able to empower your child to transformative measures. Listen, Well, I know you're listening, that you're still with me, and I thank you for that, that we're together in this journey. And I know I said listen, but let me scratch that. You are listening, but listen to yourself. Listen to the wisdom that's inside of you. Listen and look beyond just the worldview. Listen with that third ear to what's being said, and how what your child is going through is conceptualized. What view? Is it a view of your child really? Or is it more of a view of the disorder or the struggle? Are we able to break free so we can empower our child in or our children, or that child in what they are able to do? Because that child is likely way more able, and we are responsible to unlock that. How do we unlock that? We've been talking about the accurate information, and you want, you are hungry for, likely, my guess is many of you are hungry for, okay, AJ, how do we get to this plan? We need some practical stuff. What do we do? Okay. The first thing that we've got to do is we have got to take the opportunity and the responsibility to open our minds, to shift our focus first. Because if we keep allowing us to be inundated with views that are popular but not transformative, that then we're going to continue to get stuck. We're going to fall back, like we are going to be tempted to fall back into these ways of thinking instead of being able to go to the heliocentric view. And even though it may not be popular, even though it's like we're in the 16th century, even though it might be criticized, even though people may not be on board, that we can be able to understand the universe of our child accurately and be able to stick with it despite that controversy. We're not here to stir up controversy. We're here to recognize that the controversy is already there. The controversy is between the divergence of what's popular and what's accurate. So, I we're on this journey. I ask you, how can you use your own wisdom? What is your own wisdom telling you? What have you heard today that you'd like to look more into? What do you think about this geocentric view and this metaphor? What may apply to that? What might be the heliocentric or the child centric or the developmental centric view of your child? How might you look back into the videos we've already shared and let this be a part of the process of us walking together to be able to lay a foundation for something that's not tips and tricks, but is transformative for your child? So please continue to walk with me through this, because we are changing, we are transforming. That's going to lead to us transforming that child, your child, a child that we get an opportunity to empower. So stick with me, stay connected. Please subscribe. Please like the video. Please let's stay in this together. Let's continue to journey together, because you are worth it. Your child is worth it. I've got a medical disclaimer to share. I'm sorry for that little clumsy transition there, but okay. The video content is for informational purposes and not intended to be a substitute for professional and hopefully accurate. I just added the accurate part. Professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have. The video creator is not responsible for any loss or damages resulting from the use of the information. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen in this video podcast. Okay, medical disclaimer out of the way. Let's continue the journey. Stay tuned, stay connected, stay involved, and we'll see you next time as we continue to look at how to use accurate information to help you form a plan to empower your child, a child, that child to transform. Blessings.